Alrighty, wonderful. Thank you for joining us, everybody, for our virtual launch of our latest research project with our partners at the Social Research and Demonstration Corporation, called Unlocking Doors. The study explores the role of mentoring to support the career pathways of racialized young adults across Canada. Just to get started here today, I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging the lands upon which we operate, which are the traditional territories of the respective First Nations, Métis Nations, and Inuit nations who are the longtime stewards of these lands. And I will also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that I am personally located on unceded Indigenous lands, and the Kanyanhaka Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which I am today. So we have a pretty full agenda. We'll give you a bit of an overview of the research project, what we looked at, the methodologies that we used. Then we'll share some of the key findings from our project, which would be relevant for our audience today in particular, and look at some of the recommendations based on these findings, and then conclude our session with a Q&A to answer any questions you may have. And I'm delighted to be joined today by several members of our big research team. In particular, Dr. Jennifer Ray from SRDC is here. And I'm thrilled that two of our peer researchers, Mahalia and Priscilla, will be co-presenting with us today. So I will hand it over to Jennifer to introduce the project.
Thanks, Vero. Hi, everyone. So as Vero explained a little bit about, this project was really focused on exploring how mentoring can strengthen skills and support career development amongst racialized young adults, so Black, Indigenous, and young adults of color. And this project was funded under the Research and Innovation stream of the Skills for Success program from ESDC, so it was federally funded. For those of you who aren't familiar with Skills for Success, it's a framework from the government, or launched by the government, I should say. It's originally launched over 20 years ago and has been kind of updated and shifted since then. But it's really meant to be a strengths-based, empowerment-oriented way of thinking about how to assess and train young people in the skills that they need in work, but also in learning and in life. And this particular study, is based off some previous work that we did in 2020 between SRDC and Mentor Canada. And we were really interested in moving beyond the Skills for Success framework and highlighting a little bit more in depth about how racialized youth build skills, what types of skills they value, the strengths and skills that they bring. And even things like how young people navigate systemic and institutional barriers and racism, rise to the challenge in education and workplace environments that they're facing. So we wanted to inform the work of mentoring organizations with this research, as well as employers and educators, really trying to have practical lessons learned that could apply to the people who are developing and delivering programs and policies for young adults. And we tried to draw on participatory approaches throughout the research. So as Vero mentioned, we were so fortunate to work with Priscilla and Mahalia throughout the entire research project as peer researchers. They really shaped the work in such a big way. I would say that our initial approach and sort of like the terminology we used and the framing to the project was definitely influenced by the original call for proposals that came from the government, but then it was something that we revisited a lot over the course of the project and had a lot of in-depth discussions about. Even the term racialized, our use of that term, and how we sort of conceptualized, how race impacts people's lived experiences, but it's a socially constructed concept, and the limitations of the term racialized. We were really sensitive to the idea that we didn't want to erase or conflate distinct identities within that really broad use of that term. So we were having a lot of kind of critical discussions about that, and not centering whiteness as a dominant experience in the project. So we really recognize the limitations of the term racialized, as well as the term BIPOC. And so, yeah, just to note that we are using some of those language interchangeably throughout the presentation, but we recognize that the terms are not perfect, and by no means is this a monolith. But our goal and our priority throughout the research was really to try and be attuned to the realities of young adults' lived experiences and really center young adults' voices in this work. So hopefully you'll see that come out in the findings that we present today. So our methods were two-part. We had a mixed methods design. So we had both quantitative and qualitative components to our project that were really complementing each other and really informed one after the other. We began with a literature review, and we also had a round of initial sort of expert consultations, which were really helpful in shaping our work. So some of the key themes that came out from those initial consultations around cultural safety, trust, equity-focused mentoring, those conversations really then informed our data collection tools and strategy. So the questions that we went on to ask young people, both in our surveys and in our interviews, were really informed by that initial round of engagement, which was really helpful. The quantitative portion of our project focused on a nationally representative survey. So this was a panel survey that we worked with. At the time, they were called Mara Matchbox. They've since been rebranded as Harris Poll. But we worked with this company who have a panel of individuals that they accessed for the survey, and they were able to construct a panel that was nationally representative of youth aged 18 to 30. And we deliberately oversampled for racialized youth as well. And in the end, we were able to have over 3,000 participants complete our survey. And roughly half of the sample was racialized youth. So we had a large enough number to really work with and dig into some of the analysis, which you'll see today. And then on the qualitative side, Priscilla and Mihalia were instrumental in actually speaking with young people and hearing in depth in their own words about their experiences. So they conducted the semi-structured interviews that we had with youth. We had 23 youth participants, and then our team also worked to speak to some mentor stakeholders during this interview phase about their perspectives and thoughts on mentoring for young people. And after we did our initial both quantitative and qualitative data collection, again, in spirit of that participatory approach, we came back and had a workshop, a series of interactive workshops with the youth and the mentor stakeholders, where we shared back our preliminary findings and we got their impressions about it and sort of validated some of the work and extended some of the analysis too. So it was an ongoing iterative process to end up with the results that we have today. And I'm just going to pass it to Priscilla now, who's going to start with talking about the findings and some of the takeaway messages from the research.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. So when it comes to who experiences mentorship, so what we have here, the chart is broken into the racial identities and also our age. And with age, we have those who experience mentorship before 18 and after 18. One interesting thing to find is that among all BIPOC youth, realize that across the ages, that's before 18 and after 18, they experienced higher interest in mentorship, or they experience access to mentorship compared to the white compared to white. So when it comes to the overall or BIPOC youth, we have 71% of the youth saying yes to mentorship. That when we combine before 18 and after 18, 71% responded yes to receiving mentorship, and 29% said no to receiving mentorship. And also before 18 years, we also, for all BIPOC youth, we saw that 59% responded to yes, and also experiencing mentorship after 18 is 64. So this shows that most BIPOC youth experiences mentorship after they are 18 or during perhaps when they are in school. And also same with the breakdowns for Black youth and also for Indigenous. But there should be caution when looking at this data set for Black and Indigenous youth. This is more for trends, but if we compare it to the overall data set, it shows and follows a similar pattern. In continuing this as well, so a little less than one in five, that's 18% of racialized young adults, they have also participated in formal mentorship. So we categorize mentorship to be formal and natural. So 18% of racialized youth have participated in the formal, and majority of that also came through natural mentoring from people that they know based on, let's say, in their communities, in their church, in their families as well. And so it means that in three out of four of the survey participants, the responses that we had that they had a mentor since they turned 18 and that that mentor has had like a huge influence in their lives. So we also made youth define what they mean by mentorship, but majority of that definition was in terms of career. Also, at the same time, they also acknowledge that the value of receiving that mentorship, it also focused on their personal growth and their emotional support. So some of the words that we saw of that was consistent among every or majority of the response was that it was building trust. It means that trust is very important and in a mentoring relationship and how committed, how is that environment or is that relationship or is that conversation that they're going to have with their mentor? Is it non-judgmental? And how collaborative it is. So these are some of the words that we saw coming up when we asked you to define who or what the quality of a good mentor is. So this quote from one of the participants really reflects what a successful or what a mentor is. So the quote reads that, so in terms of being a successful mentor, so I think she was really good at understanding what my goals were, and rather than imposing like her ideas or goals, she would always listen to what I wanted to do, talk through all of my options, and help me come to a conclusion as to what I should do next. So this quote really captures what mentor or what a mentor, who a mentor should. And this is also reflective of majority of the youth that we had conversations with.
So
Thank you.
mentor and mentee matching was something that we really tried to look into in depth in the project and something that youth had a lot to say around, and there was a lot of nuance in the messaging that we got from youth. So in the quantitative survey, one of the questions we asked was about what mattered in terms of matching with a mentor to youth and what they prioritized. And you can see that the finding shows obviously youth really um, were invested in understanding the education and career interests of their mentors and looking for somebody that had a match with their own. But they were also really interested in matching with someone who had shared lived experience on experiences that mattered to them as well. And so we dove into this in a little bit more depth in the qualitative interviews and really started to understand how trust was really highlighted as being essential by young people, especially when navigating systemic barriers. They wanted mentors who were able to create spaces where they could be their authentic selves and also have a break from the emotional labor of explaining their experiences as racialized youth. So they wanted the opportunity to have shared racial or cultural identity because that could foster trust and safety. But they also talked a lot about how communities are diverse, heterogeneous, sorry, that are very diverse, and effective mentorship is not solely defined by identity. Um, and so you've talked about being open to having a mentor with a different background, if they could provide meaningful guidance to them. Some you've had experiences with mentors from different backgrounds that they spoke positively about. And yeah, they just overall kind of talked about this balance between professional alignment, shared values, trust, but also having an in-depth understanding of the systemic barriers that they were facing. So overall, we definitely heard the message that race, gender, cultural matching, it can be part of what makes an effective match between mentors and mentees. It can enhance the support that mentors are providing, but also that it's important to consider mentors of any background when it comes to their commitment, their cultural humility, and their ability to provide guidance and access to knowledge and opportunities that youth are valuing. So yeah, there was a lot of depth there, and youth had a lot of individual preferences in that regard. Um, And this also kind of closely aligns with what youth were trying to get out of mentoring, what they were interested in receiving from a mentor, and their sort of priorities in seeking out mentorship in the first place. So, our biggest takeaway message in this area was just how much youth really were prioritizing mentorship for career guidance. So, wanting mentors in the same field as them who could share expertise, job market insights, practical support. That was really a priority for a lot of youth, that career-focused mentorship, especially during times of transition. So we were talking to youth who are aged 18 to 30. And so going through graduation, role changes, embarking on their career, all these types of transitions, they were really seeking advice through those advice and guidance and mentorship through those experiences. So they talked about things like time management, work-life balance, navigating professional choices and decisions, and how much a mentor could help guiding that career trajectory for them and having that sort of consistent presence in their life to get on a good track at that time. So while we mostly heard about career-oriented mentorship at first, there were also youth that talked about how they wanted more broadly social emotional support from a mentor. So, that support, connection, validation, particularly if they felt like they were missing that in other networks in their life, like in their family relationships or their peer relationships. Just, the quote here, like wanting someone to talk to about personal things. Youth were also open to that, and in some cases talked about starting with career-focused mentoring, but then progressing into building that trust to have more of a personal connection and personal conversation. That said, though, a lot of youth raised the importance of maintaining boundaries for them, that they, distinguished between mentorship and therapy, for example, and that they sometimes like the idea of having a clear delineation, so having multiple mentors for different areas of their lives, having a professional mentor and then having a personal mentor, for example, or having somebody where they explored more like racial and cultural identity development in a different area of their life. And so, yeah, also just in general, youth talked about wanting a mentor who could come alongside them, who could help increase their access to opportunities, things like scholarships or networks that they previously wouldn't have had access to. So somebody who's coming alongside me and unlocking doors. So that's where we kind of got the title of our project from, this idea of opening some opportunities that otherwise might have been closed off. But yeah, overall, definitely heard about how youth were seeing mentorship as a crucial resource for their career progression, their skill building, their social networks, while also supporting also supporting personal growth and validation in this stage of their life. And in general, especially in the qualitative, where we were able to unpack this and ask youth about the areas of their life that they wanted support in, we got some good quotes here. Like, for example, one youth who's saying that they don't think there's ever going to be a time that they don't need a mentor, but at the same time that it's not that they need a mentor for every aspect of their life, which I think was an interesting theme that came out, that mentorship should really be seen as like complementary to the other sorts of existing supports that youth are seeking out and nurturing in their lives. So it doesn't replace all of those existing supports, and it's not necessarily a one size fits all kind of a support. So, for example, youth talked a lot about the support they're receiving from their parents and the important role that their parents play in guiding their career and education journeys. Um, Youth had various experiences there. Sometimes they talked about their parents being, really directive, and guiding them in a particular way. And others talked about their experience of having parents who were a bit more hands-off or maybe unfamiliar with Canadian systems, and sort of providing more freedom of choice, but also then somewhat limited, like practical support. So yeah, the youth were kind of talking about both the independence that came from that, but then also the lack of guidance sometimes, especially if their parents themselves were struggling through situations like having unrecognized credentials or difficult work transitions in their own life, and then how that impacted youth. We also heard about the role of social media in youth lives and how some youth were turning to things like YouTube and to look for role models or to gain information that help them make career decisions and navigate their educational pathways too. So we heard a lot about how social media was a place that youth were turning to discover different programs, to do professional networking, to make connections. But they also were very mindful of, the impact on mental health and how some of the online interactions they were having were sort of shallow or not entirely supportive in all ways. So yeah, just in general, learning about how there are both benefits and seeing these other supports as tools, opening dialogue, especially for youth that might have been disconnected or isolated in other ways. But that there was really mixed experiences with those types of supports. So overall, the kind of key takeaways that we take from both the quantitative and the qualitative results in this area, as you saw in the slide that Priscilla presented, nearly 2/3 of racialized youth overall do have experience with mentorship, especially with natural mentors, as opposed to like program or structured mentoring. And young adults definitely see mentors as a key resource to help them in their careers and navigate transitions and systems. They want mentors who walk alongside them and open doors for them and complement the supports they already have and they already count on. Less about being directive or prescriptive in this way. They really want that collaborative relationship. And when they're deciding who they want to receive mentorship from, it's a really individual decision, but in general, really emphasizing that each youth has things that are important to them, that matter to them, and that they want to have in common with a mentor.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'll take us through the next section that looks at what mentors are doing that is having an impact and making a difference in the lives of racialized young people, starting with the types of support that mentors provide. We're seeing with this age group that emotional support still comes out quite strongly, right? So mentors are there to listen to youth and validate their experiences. But we're also seeing how informational support, such as advice and guidance, helping youth set and reach goals, but also broadening horizons and introducing youth to new experiences and opportunities, come out quite strongly in what mentors are providing and offering as support to young people. Then we're also seeing the influence of mentors on skill development, particularly those skills for success, which Jennifer spoke to earlier when we started here. And it's really striking to see that about 9 out of 10 mentored racialized young adult told us that their mentors working with them and collaborating with them help them develop and strengthen those skills for success, particularly adaptability, communication, problem solving, collaboration. But we're also seeing an influence on young people's social skills and on digital skills. And interestingly, mentors seem to have a greater influence on the development of digital skills for racialized young adults as opposed to white young adults. Another area where we saw a strong influence of mentors is on young people's well-being and belonging. We saw how mentoring can help counteract some of the negative societal messages that racialized young people may encounter in our society and in predominantly white environments. We're seeing mentors, and this is consistent with some research we did again in 2020. We're seeing mentors have a tremendous amount of influence on young people's self-confidence and self-esteem. So that relationship seems to be particularly well suited to help youth feel good about themselves, about their abilities. We're also seeing mentors have a strong influence on young people's optimism. Particularly in a time where the future seems uncertain. That is not something that should be underestimated. And we're also seeing mentors having an influence on young people's self-advocacy and help-seeking attitudes. So they're able to work with you to help them advocate for themselves and help them understand that they are deserving of help and help them seek help when they need it. And again, we're seeing this as a through line from our research in 2020 to this new research. Mentors do help young people feel that they belong, and belonging is essential for success, right? If you don't feel like you belong, you're not going to feel that you have a space to contribute and share your thoughts and your ideas, for example, in the workplace. We also saw the influence of mentors on resistance capital. And resistance capital is the ability to stand up for yourself and resist systems that are designed to marginalize or discriminate against you. So we saw that mentors help first and foremost by providing safe spaces where racialized youth can process and validate experiences of discrimination. But they're also helping you to understand systems and helping them advocate for themselves and their communities. Um, when the research team spoke to the mentoring stakeholders, we heard that mentoring is one of the tools that helps challenge systems of oppression and racism. We also saw how sponsorship, in addition to mentorship, helps tackle those inequities. Um, we also saw that mentorship helps young people develop their critical consciousness as well as their skills to navigate discrimination and work for social change in their communities and in society more broadly. Um, so I will hand it over to Mahalia to talk us through some of the benefits that we have observed from mentorship in this study.
Yeah. Thank you, Vero. So overall, in the study, we saw that youth with mentorship experiences um, had a lot of benefits. Specifically with racialized youth, we saw benefits in terms of their well-being, their feelings of connectedness, their career journeys, and their education experiences. When we look at the quantitative data, so the data we gathered from the national survey, we found that racialized youth with mentorship experience within their lifetimes, so either growing up or since entering early adulthood, these youth were statistically more likely to report having excellent mental health, better overall well-being, um, higher resistance capital, and the ability to kind of challenge like inequities and contribute to greater social capital and also have a strong sense of belonging within their own communities. We also saw that those who reported mentorship experiences before turning 18, so throughout their early childhood, these racialized youth were more likely to have a better sense of educational belonging. So these youth felt more confident to be their authentic selves at school. They were able to feel like they could ask for help. And they felt like they could speak up while they were going throughout their schooling experiences. We also found that these youth were also more likely to be engaged in education or employment entering early adulthood. So this could be like the start of their career journeys, but this could also be entering like university or college or achieving some type of diploma for their career journeys. Overall, we found that mentors can help youth develop these skills, including skills in terms of equity, resistance, and social change. Mentors have influenced a racialized youth's self-esteem, their self-confidence, and their ability to ask for help and to stand up for themselves. And mentors can help youth navigate racism and empower them to take action and change to address experiences of racism and inequities in their lives. And overall, we see that mentorship may include better mental health and well-being and a stronger social capital for racialized youth.
Thank you, Mahalia. So back to making mentoring even better, because we also need to know the gaps and the challenges that exist so that we can best help resolve or fill those gaps. So when it comes to the mentoring gap and barrier, so even though we had two-thirds of racialized youth having mentoring or having access to mentorship. So the one-third of the racialized youth who did not have access to mentoring. So among the 85%, sorry, of those youth reported to having one or two barriers, and also as against 80% with white youth. So some of these common obstacles that they experience is not knowing how to find a natural mentor. So outside their immediate family of, let's say, telling their parents or their siblings, sometimes it all goes back to trust because they need the trust to relay information to help someone walk through that process, their thought processes. So they didn't also know how to find those people, and also not having the certainty of whether this mentoring program is useful to them, because there are a lot of programs out there, but sometimes it's very difficult to know that would this mentoring program assist me with what I need. It all wraps down to they having to figure it out and solve it themselves, and all having to have this kind of facade that they put on and saying I can do it all by myself or not. And same way too, we had youths also highlighting that they didn't have their awareness about any mentoring programs, because we had one youth during the interview say that if one mentor had knocked on her door, she would have been willing to sign up. So not having those accesses, because youths, if you ask them that, do you know that there's a mentoring program which exists, some would say no, because so that means there's lack of an awareness of mentoring programs itself existing. And some other additional barriers that we saw relate to logistic challenges such as transportation, or some are have housing instability, or sometimes some programs have long application processes that can make the youth would not want to go through that lengthy application process. And also some support end at 24, because if you look at some mentoring programs, it ends at 24. So other youths are 25, 26, because support does not end there. So having that kind of wraparound support that continue after 24 or after the 24, so 25, 26, they also need support. And also, it also goes back to some also family disinterest. So some families would say no, they don't want any other person talking to their children. So sometimes youth would not want to pursue that as well. And also they having the cultural stereotype that is wrapped around some racialized groups that you don't have to seek help. No help is coming. So figure it all by yourselves. So breaking those myths, and also having this um, model minority myth among STEM youth in STEM as well. So even though we had youth having positive experiences with mentors, we also had one or two negative challenges that some experienced. This is mostly that it's tied frequently, or it's tied to communication or lack of meaningful connection. So how communication is received, because we know communication is a two-way process. So the receiver and the sender. So if that is not transmitted, sometimes it can disrupt that collaboration with what a mentoring program or what a mentorship should look like. And also sometimes the youth also they express the hesitation because they feel that the relationship feels so inequitable, or that sometimes the mentors appear to be so superior, so they don't have that kind of environment to feel themselves, or they have to come up with or have these shells where they have to go and feel free to relay every information or what help that they need. Also, we also have, this is also relating to the mentorship program itself, that sometimes, after COVID, there have been a lot of like reduced funding for most programs. So sometimes youth are referred to outside support services instead of having all these things in-house. So sometimes it's not that it's mostly related to the funding cuts and also longer wait lists. Sometimes, so when it comes to the volunteers who volunteer to mentor, there are limited people who have signed up to mentor. So sometimes youth cannot be matched to who they want to be mentored or in their particular field. So these kind of contribute to that negative and challenging experiences that some youth have with mentors.
Thank you, Priscilla. So, what we found is in the study is that there's some clear benefits to having mentors for racializing adults, but we also saw a few of those barriers and negative experiences that we shouldn't dismiss, right? Because despite strong evidence of positive influences, when some of the young people we talk to have negative experiences, it can be a massive it can have a large impact and long-lasting effects on their help-seeking attitudes and behaviors. So we don't want to have situations and programs where young people have negative experiences and then turn away from those types of relationship or support in the future. So some of the key takeaways from our study is that well, there are barriers and challenges that are preventing far too many racialized youth from reaping the benefits of mentorship. Negative experiences can discourage racialized youth from seeking future opportunities. And it is important to use a collaborative, empowering approach to mentoring programs where youth feel empowered and can proactively engage as opposed to hierarchical inequitable mentoring programs and relationships. I'll hand it over to Mahalia for some of the recommendations coming from this.
Yeah, thank you, Vero. So overall, we have a few recommendations in terms of mentorship. And I think one of the biggest things that we noticed is that mentorship among racialized youth is still pretty hard to access, like what Priscilla shared earlier. There's still quite a few barriers that can prevent youth from engaging in a mentorship program. So programs should actively try to engage racialized youth in a lot of accessible spaces. However, this can also be translated to adapting your outreach strategy because there's still misunderstanding or not really understanding what mentorship is or what it can provide to a youth. And ideally, we can position mentorship as a complement to the current support systems that youth already have. We see that youth are already they have a lot of skills, they're very empowered, they're very capable. And mentorship should be used in a way to complement what they already have and bring them to a level where they would be happy and confident in their skills or in their career or whatever they're looking for support on. Mentors can also help provide guidance in areas where youth may lack some familial support or support from within their own communities. With our age group specifically, a lot of these youth are transitioning from like their teens and their childhoods into early adulthood. And that can be quite scary, and it's a lot of new experiences for everyone. So having a mentor to provide support during these critical transitions can be incredibly valuable, especially when we're looking at transitioning into different forms of education, entering the workforce, or even learning how to manage like finances. Um, and mentorship should focus on empowerment. Like we said earlier, we're looking at mentorship that is collaborative in nature, that is really listening to what the youth needs and helping them get to where they want to be. Mentors should also ensure that they balance instrumental and emotional support. Uh, a lot of youth do value career guidance, and we've seen that it's one of the highest like reported reasons as to why youth enter a mentorship program to begin with. But there's other ways that mentors need to provide support to youth to make sure they also complete the programs or continue to want to nurture the relationship with their mentors, whether this is through like encouragement or just providing a space for validation for youth while they go throughout these very different times in their lives. In terms of matching, we found that having a shared racial identity can help, but we still see that youth still prioritize very similar career interests, career goals, lived experiences, and values. Ensuring that mentors are a example of the voices that mentees have within themselves, or that the mentors are in a position where mentees envision themselves to be. Also giving the ability for the youth to have an influence in the matching process can help increase the effectiveness of a match. Okay, we're almost done. We're also hoping that mentors can be trained in cultural humility and anti-racism, especially when working with equity-deserving groups. Mentors themselves also need support to be effective mentors. Mentorship is a two-way relationship. A lot of mentors will learn from youth and vice versa. So ensuring that mentors also have the supports they need throughout the program and beyond. Mentorship should help youth reduce like any pressures that they're feeling in their lives. Obviously this is done through support, but also ensuring that youth kind of learn that failure is okay. And that we have examples of how to persist through change or persist through hardship, and develop healthy coping strategies. Ideally, mentorship can also foster a lot of aspirational, navigational, and like linguistic changes. We're looking at mentors that can help support both personal growth and systemic change within the communities that they serve and the systems that youth navigate through. And finally, there's a strong importance in natural mentorship. What we've noticed in the study is that some youth didn't realize that they had mentors until we defined what a natural mentor was for them. And so providing the context of mentorship being seen through a friendship or through a coach or a supervisor or someone within their lives already, can also help with